They had been sharpening their claws, waiting for the day they could show the galaxy just how dangerous they had become. The battle in Earth's orbit had ended, but its shockwaves rippled far beyond the Sol system. In the days that followed, news of the Council's defeat spread faster than any official broadcast could control. On a mining station in the Keller Belt, far from Earth, alien workers huddled around a flickering holoscreen. The grainy footage showed human warships tearing through the Council blockade, railgun fire carving up destroyers like drifting ice. The miners whispered in their own language, the same thought passing between them. If the humans can fight back, maybe we can too, in the streets of Lorith Prime, a world that had been under Council control for 3 generations. Shopkeepers left their stalls to watch the replay of Ambassador Karen Holt smiling at Councillor Virex, then the clips of the battle, then the retreat of the once unbeatable fleet. Children cheered, old veterans stood straighter, inside the Council's own chambers. The mood was nothing like before, where once the great circular hall echoed with the voices of confident rulers. Now it was filled with hushed arguments. Members demanded reinforcements, others demanded peace. All of them understood the same truth. The Council had been wounded, not in the outer fringes of its territory, but at its very core of power. Councillor Virex stood alone in his private chamber, replaying the battle feeds over and over, searching for an explanation. Every maneuver, every strike from the humans felt intentional, coordinated, honed. He realized with a sinking feeling that this had not been a desperate defense. This had been a war plan years in the making. On Earth, the United Nations chamber was alive with voices, but this time, they weren't debating surrender. They were discussing the next move in a secure room beneath the assembly hall. Karen Holt met with Admiral Lavra Briggs and Captain Daniel Cross, a large holographic map of the galaxy rotating between them. "We've opened the crack," Lavra said, her voice level. "Now the rest will follow." "They already are," Daniel replied, pointing to several highlighted systems on the map. Rebellions in 3 sectors, uprisings on 2 industrial worlds. All within days of the blockade breaking. Holt folded his arms. The Council has always ruled through fear, but now they're the ones afraid, and the galaxy can smell it. Out in the frontier, smaller fleets from other species began to harass Council patrols, not large battles, but enough to bleed their resources in some systems. Planetary militias declared independence outright, knowing the Council was too busy covering its losses to respond quickly. In the wreckage fields beyond the moon, salvage crews picked through what was left of the alien fleet, towing debris back to hidden stations where engineers swarmed over it, studying enemy technology for weaknesses, for improvements, for the next battle. On the surviving Council ships limping home, morale was broken. Officers avoided looking their crews in the eyes, because they all knew they had not been beaten by overwhelming numbers. They had been beaten by a force that understood them, outhought them, outmaneuvered them, and vanished before they could recover. One alien captain, nursing a broken arm from the shock of a hull breach, recorded a message to his family. "We were told humans were primitive. They are not." His voice was quiet, almost ashamed. "They are not like the others we have conquered. They fight like they have been waiting for us." In the Council's inner circle, some leaders called for negotiations, others demanded Earth's destruction at any cost, but resources were stretched thin, and the fear of another public defeat kept many from pushing too hard. Meanwhile, across human-controlled space, the victory became a symbol, not just of survival, but of control. Recruitment offices filled with volunteers, shipyards increased production, engineers worked double shifts to prepare the next generation of warships. The smile that had started it all, Holt's calm expression in the face of a death sentence, was now painted on the hulls of several human ships. A silent message to anyone watching from a distance. The Council's power was not gone yet, but the fracture had formed, and the galaxy was beginning to shift. In a quiet moment aboard the Vanguard, Daniel Cross stood at the viewport, watching the stars drift. He knew this wasn't the end of the war, But for the first time in his career, he felt the tide turning. Not just for Earth, but for every world that had lived under the Council's shadow, far away, in places where humans had never set foot. That same feeling was growing, the realization that the most dangerous thing in the galaxy was not a vast fleet or a superweapon. It was a species that refused to kneel, and had just proved it in front of everyone. Months had passed since the day the blockade fell. The wreckage of the Council's fleet no longer drifted above Earth. Most had burned up in the atmosphere. The rest had been hauled away by salvage crews. Now the skies were clear again, blue and calm, but no one on Earth saw them the same way anymore. The United Nations chamber was no longer a place of desperate debates. Now it was a command center, walls lined with tactical maps and fleet readiness reports. Karen Holt walked the floor with a calm confidence, speaking with envoys from allied colonies and newly freed worlds. The galaxy that once ignored Earth was now listening closely, out in orbit. The human fleet was larger than it had ever been. Old ships were refitted. New ones rolled out from hidden shipyards at a steady pace. The Vanguard and Resolute floated among them like veterans in a formation of fresh recruits. On the bridge of the Resolute, Commander Lara Briggs looked over the final patrol roster. "We've got every border covered," Mercer reported, "and the frontier stations are fully stocked." Lara gave a small nod. "Good, keep them. That way, the Council will be back." She knew it was not a question of if, but when, across the stars. The Council's official broadcast spoke of restructuring and peace talks, but their shipyards were working day and night. Their military was shifting fleets to guard core systems. The wound Earth had dealt them was deep, but it was not fatal, not yet, on Lorith Prime. Citizens tore down the banners of the Council and raised their own. In the Keller Belt, miners formed armed convoys to keep their shipments from falling into Council hands. In the Rim colonies, whispered rumors said human advisors were training local militias. The smile, Holt's calm, almost defiant smile, had become a symbol painted on more than just human ships now. Alien freighters carried it, too, a quiet sign to others that they were not alone. On the Vanguard, Daniel Cross stood at the tow. Forward viewport, Earth spinning slowly below. Sarah Blake joined him, holding 2 fresh mugs of coffee. "Feels different now, doesn't it?" she asked. Daniel took the mug, nodding slowly. "It does. But this isn't the end. This was just the first round." She looked out at the horizon, where the curve of the planet met the black of space. "Do you think the Council understands that yet?" Daniel gave a small, almost Holt-like smile. "They will." Back on the surface, children played in parks without looking up in fear. Markets bustled with goods from across human space. But beneath the normal life, there was a quiet readiness. Every adult knew the price of peace. And every shipyard worker knew their job was far from over. At night, in the secure rooms beneath Earth Command, plans were drawn for new fleets, faster drives, stronger shields, weapons no one outside the program had ever seen. Humanity had learned from its history. You do not wait for the next blow. You prepare for it. In the Galactic Council's private chambers, Virex reviewed fresh intelligence reports. They spoke of human alliances forming in places the Council once controlled, of new warship sightings in sectors far from Sol. His advisors urged caution, but he knew the truth. The humans would not stop here. For centuries, the Council had been the final word in the galaxy, their decrees unquestioned, their power absolute. Now that power had been challenged, and in that challenge, the Council saw a future they could not control. Weeks later, the Vanguard and Resolute met in deep orbit for a quiet ceremony. No speeches, no cameras, just the crew standing at attention as the 2 ships drifted side by side. Daniel and Lavra exchanged a nod across the com channel, no words needed. They both understood. They had been part of the moment the galaxy changed. As the ships turned toward their next assignments, the stars stretched ahead like an endless ocean. Somewhere out there, the Council was rebuilding. Somewhere out there, the next war was already waiting to begin. But this time, Earth would not be caught off guard, and when that day came, the galaxy would remember. The last time they demanded humanity's surrender, Earth just smiled back. In the far edges of the galaxy, news traveled slowly, but rumors always traveled faster than truth. On the crowded decks of alien spaceports, in the smoky corners of trading halls, whispers passed from one traveler to another about something. Humans were building. They called it the Aegis Cannon, though no one outside Earth knew what it looked like or what it could do. Some claimed it was a new kind of laser. Others thought it was a missile launcher so large it could destroy a fleet with a single shot. But the truth was hidden, locked away in human military vaults, guarded by silence and steel on the mining colony of New Arden. Far from Earth's core worlds, strange construction had been going on for years. Massive shipments of rare metals arrived without explanation. Entire factories worked day and night, but produced nothing that was sent to market. Alien traders noticed the activity and began to guess, was this the humans preparing for war? Or was it just another one of their unpredictable experiments? Many alien races thought humans were reckless, daring, and always looking for trouble. They remembered how humanity had spread into space in just a few centuries, building colonies in places even veteran alien navigators avoided. Some respected that courage, others feared it, and some simply thought humans were foolish. But no one took them as a serious military threat, not compared to the ancient empires with fleets that had ruled for thousands of years. The Galactic Council heard the rumors too. In their grand chamber orbiting the red giant star Altheris, representatives from dozens of species debated in quiet tones. Some believed the Aegis Cannon was just a bluff, a way for humans to make themselves look stronger. Others argued that the secrecy alone was reason to worry. For if there was one thing the Council had learned about humans, it was that they often kept their most dangerous surprises hidden until the last possible moment. Far from the politics, on the deck of the Terran Navy ship TN-S Vanguard, Captain Lavra Bennett stood in her ready room, reading the latest secure reports. The Vanguard had been assigned to New Arden for 3 years, watching over the mysterious construction project. She had seen the deliveries, the convoys of armored cargo ships, the heavily guarded convoys of engineers moving between facilities. She had seen the way the workers spoke in low voices, always glancing over their shoulders. Even when they thought no one was watching, Captain Bennett knew more than most, but even she did not have the full picture. Her orders came sealed and encoded, delivered by trusted couriers who never spoke a word. She was told only that the weapon being built would change everything, and that when the time came, she and her crew would be ready to protect it with their lives. In the crew quarters of the Vanguard, the younger officers and engineers speculated endlessly. Commander Eric Dalton, her second-in-command, had heard the rumors just like everyone else, but he had his own suspicions. He guessed it was not a laser, not a missile, but something entirely different. He had studied human history, and he knew that sometimes the old weapons, reinvented with new technology, could be more terrifying than anything modern science had produced. Meanwhile, on alien worlds across the galaxy, small spy ships slipped into human space, hoping to catch a glimpse of the project. Most were intercepted and turned away. Some vanished entirely, never returning to report what they had found. This only deepened the mystery. The name Aegis began to carry weight, whispered like a curse or a prayer, depending on who was speaking. For the people of New Arden, life went on. Farmers tended their fields under the pale light of the twin moons. Children played in the dusty streets of small frontier towns, but always in the distance. The massive construction yards loomed, their giant doors sealed, the sound of heavy machinery echoing across the plains at all hours. The colony had grown used to the sight, but the rest of the galaxy could not stop wondering. One night, as Captain Bennett walked the observation deck, she watched the stars and thought about what was coming. She knew a storm was brewing. She had seen the signs: increased patrols at the borders, alien warships making quiet probes into human territory, political meetings growing tense. Trade agreements being delayed, the galaxy was changing. And she could feel it in her bones. She did not know when the moment would come, only that it would, and when it did, the Aegis cannon would be revealed, and in that instant, every rumor, every whisper, every piece of speculation would be replaced by one undeniable truth. Humanity was about to change the balance of power forever. The first sign of danger came not from human scanners, but from the frightened faces of traders. Arriving at New Arden, they spoke of a Corlin fleet moving through the border systems, its dreadnoughts black as midnight and bristling with plasma lances. The Corlin were not a race that bluffed. When their ships appeared in your space, it meant one thing: conquest. At first, the Galactic Council sent messages urging calm. They told the human colonies to stand down, to avoid provoking the Corlin. They promised that negotiations could prevent bloodshed. But Captain Lavra Bennett knew better. She had read the classified reports. The Corlin had been testing human defenses for months, sending small ships close to patrol routes, measuring how fast the Terran Navy could respond. This was not the start of talks. This was the beginning of an invasion on the TNS Vanguard. The tension was heavy. Commander Eric Dalton stood at the main tactical display, his jaw tight. His officers were running simulations, each one ending the same way: the Corlin fleet overpowering human defenses in hours. Humanity had warships, yes, but nothing that could match a fully armed Corlin dreadnought in a head-on fight. Not until now, that night, under the dim red lights of the command deck, Dalton received a sealed transmission marked Omega Priority. The encryption took minutes to crack, and when it did, he read the orders twice before speaking. The message was short and clear. The Aegis cannon was operational. The Vanguard was to protect New Arden at all costs. And if the Corlin fleet crossed into orbit, they were authorized to use the weapon. Dalton looked up at Bennett. She met his gaze, her eyes steady. There was no hesitation. They both knew what it meant. The secret humanity had guarded for years was about to be unleashed across the colony. Alarms began to sound. Civilians were ordered to shelters. Local defense crews scrambled to their stations, and from the far horizon, the dark shapes of incoming ships appeared against the starlit sky. The Corlin had arrived faster than expected. Their formation was tight, their weapons already powered. On the Vanguard, the crew moved with silent efficiency. Engineers in the lower decks checked the magnetic acceleration coils, adjusting the superconductors, monitoring the massive energy buildup in the gunnery control room. Chief Lana Morris ran her hands across the controls like a musician preparing for the most important performance of her life. She had helped build this weapon, and she knew exactly what it could do in the void between planets. The Corlin flagship opened a channel. The alien commander's voice was cold and without emotion, ordering humanity to surrender New Arden and all its people. He gave them 1 hour to decide. But on the bridge of the Vanguard, Captain Bennett didn't need an hour. She simply ordered one thing: prepare to fire. The Aegis cannon was waking up for the first time, and the galaxy had no idea what was about to happen. Deep inside the armored heart of the TN's Vanguard, behind blast doors thicker than a fortress wall, the Aegis cannon rested like a sleeping giant. It stretched the length of 6 city blocks, a massive spine of gleaming alloy and magnetic coils. To see it in person was to understand why the project had been kept secret for so long. This was not a laser, not a missile, not a weapon the galaxy was used to. It was a railgun, but unlike anything in history, the core could fire a solid tungsten slug the size of a shuttle, accelerating it to a fraction below light speed. No shielding, no armor, no known defense could stop it. The sheer kinetic force could shatter a capital ship in one strike. Chief Engineer Lana Morris moved along the main power conduits, her hands checking each glowing coil housing. Her team worked in silence, every one of them aware that if a single coil failed, the weapon could tear itself apart. They had trained for this moment for years, running simulations until the steps were burned into their minds. But this was real now. The Corlin were coming. And the Aegis cannon's first shot would be in war, not a test range, up on the bridge. Commander Eric Dalton studied the tactical display. The Corlin dreadnoughts moved like predators, slow but unstoppable. The lead ship's armor was layered, with reflective plating meant to disperse laser fire. Dalton almost smiled. They had no idea the attack wouldn't be light. It would be raw, crushing impact. Captain Lavra Bennett stood by the main viewing pane, her arms behind her back, watching the enemy fleet close the distance. She thought of every colony that had been lost to alien fleets in the past century. Every time humanity had been forced to retreat, this time there would be no retreat. The Aegis cannon had been built for this exact moment. Below decks, the reactor output climbed. Power surged through the magnetic rails. The sound was deep, like distant thunder rolling through the ship's bones. Technicians called out coil temperatures, acceleration alignment, and projectile load status. The slug was locked into place, a massive cylinder of compressed tungsten so dense it seemed to drink in the light around it. The Corlin commander sent another transmission, demanding surrender, promising destruction. His voice was filled with the arrogance of a species that had never known defeat. On the bridge of the Vanguard, no one even bothered to reply. Bennett turned to Dalton, her voice calm but carrying the weight of finality. "Bring the cannon online." The words echoed in the silent bridge, and in that moment, every crew member knew they were about to change history. The lights in the gunnery bay dimmed as the Aegis cannon drew more power. The rails began to hum, the air around them vibrating with the energy of a storm not yet unleashed. This was the moment years of secrecy had led to, a moment that would echo across the galaxy for centuries to come. And still, the enemy kept coming closer, unaware that with the next order, their lead ship's name would be erased from history. The order came with no ceremony, no dramatic speech. Captain Bennett simply leaned forward, her voice steady. "Fire," in the gunnery bay. Chief Lana Morris pressed her hand down on the firing control. The ship seemed to take a deep breath. And then the Aegis cannon roared to life. A flash of blinding blue light burst along the length of the magnetic rails, hurling the tungsten slug into the darkness of space at a speed no living eye could track. To the Corlin fleet, nothing seemed to happen at first. The void between the ships was silent, calm, and then the slug struck. It didn't explode. It didn't burn. It simply tore through the enemy's lead dreadnought like paper. The front of the ship crumpled inward, the rear split apart, and in an instant, the massive vessel became a drifting storm of glowing debris. On the bridge of the Vanguard, no one spoke, not even Dalton. The crew just stared at the tactical display. As the red icon representing the enemy's flagship winked out, one moment it was there, the next it was gone, erased from the battle map as if it had never existed, across the galaxy. In stations and ships where the battle feed was being relayed, millions watched in silence. Alien admirals froze mid-sentence. Traders in crowded spaceport bars stared open-mouthed at the screens. Even the most hardened warriors had never seen anything like it. No shield had flared, no armor had withstood. It was as if a piece of a star itself had been fired into the enemy. The Corlin formation broke for a heartbeat. Ships drifted out of alignment as if stunned. Their commanders barked orders, trying to regain control, but hesitation had already taken root. They had come expecting an easy conquest, and instead they had seen a weapon that defied everything they knew about war. In the gun deck, heat still shimmered off the rails. Engineers moved quickly to cool the coils. The reload process began, slower than any conventional weapon, but with the promise that the next shot would be just as devastating. Dalton turned to Bennett, his voice low. "They'll never forget this." She didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed on the drifting wreckage. "Outside, Hood," she said, and the word hung in the air like a warning to every ship still closing in. Somewhere out there, the Corlin commander was realizing that if humanity could fire once, they could fire again, and in the cold emptiness of space, that thought alone was more dangerous than any fleet. For a long moment after the dreadnought's destruction, space itself felt different. It was not the silence of deep space that people were used to, but a heavier kind, a silence that carried weight, the kind that came when every mind, human and alien alike, tried to understand what they had just seen, across the galaxy, in outposts and war councils. Transmissions that had been full of chatter suddenly went dead. At the Valor Observatory, scientists froze in mid-calculation, their instruments still blinking with the last recorded velocity of the projectile. In the Skoroth War conclaves, veteran admirals stared at the battlefield and said nothing. The destruction had happened too quickly for words. In the Galactic Council chamber, a hush fell over the rows of alien delegates. A few exchanged nervous glances. Others sat very still, pretending to remain calm, but their eyes betrayed them. They all understood what this meant. If the humans could build one of these weapons, they could build more. If they could build more, they could change the balance of power overnight. Back on the TNS Vanguard, Captain Bennett stood with her hands clasped behind her back, watching the drifting wreckage through the wide forward pane. She gave a simple order: reload. The command moved through the ship like a ripple. Every crew member worked with measured focus, their movements steady, precise. The second slug was being prepared, and the crew knew the galaxy was still. Watching, Commander Dalton moved quietly to her side. "They're not moving in yet," he said, glancing at the Corlin fleet still hanging back. "They're thinking," Bennett replied, her voice calm. "And that's dangerous for them on civilian worlds." The silence after the shot felt almost as real as the impact itself in spaceport. Markets, in homes, in military barracks, people replayed the footage over and over. The projectile didn't look impressive on screen, just a streak of light vanishing into the darkness. But then came the image of the dreadnought breaking apart. And that was all anyone needed to see. Some called it a miracle, others called it madness. But everyone understood one thing: humanity had just taken a step into a place no other race had dared. A place where fear was no longer on their side. Of the table, the Corlin fleet wavered. The perfect Predators formation they had held since crossing the border began to bend. Ships shifted uneasily, their lines no longer tight. On the Vanguard's tactical display, the movement looked small, but to a trained eye, it was the first sign of panic in the Corlin command ship. Voices clashed over the comms. Some officers demanded an immediate retreat. Others shouted for a counterattack. Their commander tried to speak with authority, but even through the static of intercepted signals, there was a tremor in his voice. They had expected resistance, but not annihilation in a single shot. Captain Bennett stood steady on the bridge, her gaze fixed on the enemy icons. She didn't rush. She didn't raise her voice. She simply said, "Arm the second shot." The order moved through the Vanguard's decks like an electric pulse. Down in the gunnery bay, Chief Lana Morris watched her team slide the next tungsten slug into position. The weapon's rails still shimmered with heat from the first firing, but cooling systems had done their job. This one would be ready faster. The crew had the rhythm now, and every second counted. The Corlin flagship began to rotate slowly, not toward the Vanguard, but away. The movement was small, almost cautious, but it carried meaning. Commander Dalton's eyes narrowed. "They're trying to disengage." Bennett said nothing, but there was the faintest hint of satisfaction in her expression. Still, not every Corlin captain wanted to flee. 2 destroyers broke formation, charging ahead with plasma lances hot and ready. Their engines flared bright against the black. Closing the gap with reckless speed, Dalton leaned closer to Bennett. "They think speed will save them," he said. She shook her head. "They've already lost." The second shot from the Aegis cannon ripped into the darkness. Another streak of light, another impossible speed. The lead destroyer didn't even have time to change course. It was there, and then it wasn't, just a cloud of molten fragments spinning into the void. The second destroyer veered hard, panic. Now clear, on alien worlds watching the live feed. Gasps and murmurs erupted. Even the bravest realized they would never want to be on the wrong side of this weapon. In that moment, the Corlin commander broke. His remaining ships turned sharply. Accelerating away from New Arden, the retreat was messy, desperate, and without dignity. For the first time in living memory, the Corlin had been driven back not by numbers, but by one ship and one weapon. In the days that followed, the battle footage spread across every known system, not just the destruction of the Corlin dreadnought, but the quiet, deliberate way the humans had done it. The Aegis cannon became a name spoken in every market. Every tavern, every war council chamber, the Galactic Council convened in emergency session. Delegates arrived in a rush. Their fleets anchored in orbit around the council's station. Normally, the chamber echoed with loud debate, but this time it was different. There was no shouting, only careful voices. Everyone knew that the old balance of power had shifted. In a single battle, the Valar ambassador called the weapon a destabilizing threat to galactic peace. But his words lacked conviction. The Skoroth warlords said nothing at all, simply watching the humans with their unblinking eyes. The Corlin seat sat empty, a silent admission of their defeat. For centuries, humanity had been treated as a young, reckless species, good for trade, but not worth fearing. That image was gone now, replaced with something new, something every alien leader would have to. Respect or fear. Trade envoys began to arrive on Earth, offering alliances and access to technology in exchange for friendship. Intelligence networks across the galaxy scrambled to steal whatever data they could about the Aegis cannon. But every attempt ended the same way. Failure on the TNS Vanguard. Captain Bennett read through the new diplomatic requests. Her orders from High Command were clear. The weapon would remain a secret, its design known only to a handful of trusted engineers. The message to the galaxy would be simple. Humanity could build more if it needed to. Commander Dalton stood at her side, looking at the streams of political reports. "It's strange," he said quietly. "We didn't win a war, but it feels like we just conquered the galaxy." Bennett allowed herself a small smile. "Sometimes one shot is enough," she replied. Weeks passed, and the Corlin did not return. Patrol ships reported only empty space where their fleets once roamed. On New Arden, the shelters were opened. The streets came alive again. But the people never forgot the night the sky lit up with the wreckage of a dreadnought. In the shipyards, the Aegis cannon was sealed behind armored blast doors. Its rails cooled, its systems powered down. To an untrained eye, it looked like a sleeping machine, but to those who had seen it fire, it was something more, a promise. The engineers who had built it went back to their quiet work. They received no parades, no medals, only the silent gratitude of a galaxy now too cautious to provoke them. Chief Lana Morris walked the length of the weapon one last time, her hand brushing the cold alloy. She knew it would not stay silent forever on the TNS Vanguard. Captain Bennett stood alone on the observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly ahead, a reminder of how small humanity still was, and yet how much weight it now carried. Somewhere out there, new threats were growing, old enemies plotting, and ambitious empires calculating risks. Commander Dalton joined her. "It's quiet," he said. She nodded. For now, the words carried no fear, only certainty. The galaxy had seen what humanity could do, and for a time, that would be enough to keep the peace. Far from New Arden, in hidden corners of the galaxy, whispers about the Aegis cannon still spread. The name had already become legend, told in the same breath as warnings to stay far from human space. Some believed it was the only one of its kind, others feared there were more. And somewhere in the quiet hum of the Vanguard systems, deep behind locked bulkheads, the great weapon waited, silent and patient, knowing that one day it might be called upon again. And when that day came, the galaxy would remember the first shot and fall silent all over again.